We continue the shir in Navi. This is the first shir of this new season, the new semester. First shir after the long vacation we've had during the summer. And I recall that the last shir we had before the summer, we stated that we are stopping at a special point in history of Navi, point where the division of the 12 tribes of Israel took place. The separation between the 10 tribes and 2 tribes. We did not go into the details then, and today's topic will try to take it up as much as possible, especially the events that led up to it. Of course, this is one of the saddest points in Jewish history, and this too implies that there's nothing more destructive for anyone, especially for the Jewish people, than disunity. Because this is what eventually led to the destruction of the Holy Temple and the exile of the Jews during the first temple and then eventually the second one, and why we are still in exile till this day. And of course this too answers the question, not just why the temple was destroyed, why the Beis HaMikdash became Charav then, but why don't we have the Beis HaMikdash rebuilt today? Why don't we have Mashiach come to us after not only so many prayers have been poured out to Hashem, so much effort has been put into this on the part of tzaddikim, who gave of themselves entirely, tefillah and tears, who dedicated their lives to the effort of bringing Mashiach, but also for the many millions of Jews, millions of martyrs who died for the sake of their emunah in Hashem, and which brings about the greatest Kiddush Hashem. They died on Kiddush Hashem. Nothing can bring Mashiach closer than an act of Kiddush Hashem. We had so many millions of tzaddikim die horrible deaths for the sake of Kiddush Hashem. Why, with all those sacrifices, have we not experienced the actual coming of Mashiach? And the answer is that the same force that destroyed the Beis HaMikdash is still adayim merakid beninu, is still prevalent amongst us, and is depriving us of the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash or the coming of Mashiach. And that is the disunity, the lack of harmony, the lack of goodwill, the lack of oneness among the Jews. This is why we could state, after the months spent in Eretz Yisrael, hoping to bring back a report from there that would be a good one, a happy one. And of course it is forbidden to bring back a bad report from Eretz Yisrael. It was the Meraglim, spies that went to Israel, came back with a bad report about the land, which caused the deaths of all the Jews over 20 in the desert, and which eventually too caused Tisha B'Av. That was the night of Tisha B'Av when they came back with this bad report. All the Jews cried when they heard this bad report about Israel, and Hashem said, because you cried for nothing, I'm going to give you something to really cry about on the same day, same historic date, Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av, when both the first and the second Beis HaMikdash were destroyed. Now this was due to a bad report. It is forbidden for a Jew ever to speak against Eretz Yisrael, regardless, to speak Lashon Hara. To speak Lashon Hara, which means to speak the truth, because Lashon Hara means slander, something bad, which is true. Now, therefore, we cannot say anything wrong, chas v'sholom, about Eretz Yisrael, because there is nothing wrong to say about it. Eretz Yisrael is sacred, it is holy, Eretz Yisrael is pure, it is Admas Kodesh. Every single pebble, every grain of dust in Eretz Yisrael is worth more definitely worth more than all the real estate in the rest of the world combined. We would never take all of the wealthy, oil-filled countries, or any type of fertile ground, or any of the garbage dumps of Russia, exchange for one single drop of soil of Eretz Yisrael. So that's the land itself, the karka, the ground of Eretz Yisrael, which is Admas Kodesh, is sacred, is holy in itself. Even the people living in Eretz Yisrael are also considered holy. We cannot see anything wrong with them. We cannot find fault with them. We see nothing wrong with any Zionist, as some people criticize. We see nothing wrong with those in Eretz Yisrael who fight for their country, who show a love for it. Even if they may not be, we don't say they aren't. They might not be that religious, so-called non-religious Zionists. We see nothing wrong with them because we are not the ones that are permitted to judge them. We also cannot condemn or criticize or speak against the Naturi Karta, the opposite of the Zionists, the non-Zionists, the violent and non-violent type, because they are all Jews. We're not supposed to speak a word against any of them. But we do say, we dislike using that word but, because it sort of puts a damper on everything said before. You're forced to say, though, that obviously there is something lacking among all this vast sea of goodness in Eretz Yisrael. And that which is lacking, which means that which would improve conditions so much more, is that ahava, the achva v'reyus. If there was more of this unity, more of this compassion one for the other, more of this willingness to live together in harmony, to see eye to eye on every issue without attacking one another, and surely, without doubt, Eretz Yisrael would become rebuilt entirely. We'd be zecher to see the coming of Mashiach, the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash. Because the Gemara says that, of course, if we had Achdus, the entire world among all Jews, naturally that would be a Beis HaMashiach. The Gemara says that Hashem does not expect too much from us. He does not expect the seemingly impossible. He asks for that which is logical and probable. And that is that let at least one community have perfect Achdus amongst themselves. Let them set the example for the rest of the Jews. Hashem promises in turn to send Mashiach. He will perfect the rest of them. Let's see one group, even one sect of Chassidim. Let there be unity at least among all the Naturi Kartas. Unity among all the semi-religious Zionists. Unity among all the Misnagdim. Unity among all of any sect of Chassidim. Even in individual groups, there are different opinions. And that's what's holding back. That's what's depriving us of the ultimate Gula. This is what we sadly bring from the land of pure Kedusha, land of perfection, that lacks this one ingredient, this drop of Achdus, which would complete it to a point where we could be sure of all becoming united there physically too. We could just have that bit of Achdus, and the moral of all this is that we must believe when the Gemara says Hashem wants one community only, one is sufficient to have Achdus among themselves. We must believe implicitly that this means regardless of the size. So, for example, if we could have perfect unity just among ourselves, let us set the example for the rest of the Jews. That would be sufficient to serve as a chain reaction. You would have others join in, and eventually this would bring the Geula too. This is proven by the fact that the Arizal, of course, that was a very select group, as small as it was, the Arizal who lived 400 years ago, who was the father of Kabbalah in Tzfas, the city of Tzfas, had a small group of students, and he told them, he assured them, he gave them the guarantee that if they could display true achdus among themselves, just among this group itself, not for outsiders, and he guaranteed them that Mashiach would come. And as small a group as it was, he gave them one final test. He said to them that we have one last test to pass, and that is we must go from Tzfas to Yerushalmi, there to greet Mashiach. And we've got to keep this unity amongst ourselves perfectly solid until we get there. And that is, as is written, they failed this test. A slight dispute, the controversy arose among some of the students in regard to a certain topic. The item itself makes no difference what it was. The point was that they did not fulfill this request, this order of their Rebbe, the Arizal. He told them that they had lost the opportunity of bringing Mashiach to the Jews. So that's why we are supposed to say, as we learn in the Gemara, each person is supposed to say, I am one organism. I am one individual. I am the same as Adam Harishon. Hashem created the whole world because of one man. So one person, one man or one woman. One man and one woman. This proves that each person is a whole world. When Adam Harishon was alive with Chava, they were the whole world. The world means humans. So each person should say, I am an entire world. It is up to me to perfect this world. So if we could perfect within ourselves this union of true harmony, then we would be the ones that guide them, bring about the Geula. Remember that the Gemara says the direct cause of the Churban Beis HaMikdash, direct cause of the Golus, of the long Golus, not the first Churban, which lasted only 70 years. The Churban and the Golus that lasted so far approximately close to 2,000 years was due to one fault, one shortcoming in the part of the Jews, and that was sinas chinam. Sinas chinam means an unreasonable dislike among the Jews themselves. That was what caused the Churban Beis HaMikdash. That's what caused the Golus. That same fault, that same shortcoming, caused the deaths of 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva. Exactly the same thing, and it is that same item which we still suffer because of today. If Mashiach did not come today, it's because there is still sinas chinam among the Jews, nothing else. So at least if we could attempt, especially now, during the Asedis Yemei Teshuva, this is the time for Teshuva. We have a lot of things to do Teshuva for. We have a lot of things to perfect. But let's go right to the top. Let's perfect the one item which is so vital that it will affect not only ourselves, the whole Klal Yisrael. We can bring Mashiach. We can bring the Gula if we unite amongst ourselves and drop petty jealousies, petty dislikes, have more consideration one for another. As we mentioned in Shabbos, first item is to let all bygones, all past, be forgotten. Anything that we might have suffered from one another, any insults intended or otherwise, the other type of items we resent in one another, let's forget them and truly forgive. And if we forgive, then Hashem will certainly forgive us too. Secondly, speaking about the division of the 12 tribes, was one more item that is especially important now. The item about, speaking of sinas chinam, this means to slander, lashon hara. Lashon hara means to speak badly about another person, though it is the truth. In fact, lashon hara means only truth. Speak lashon hara about a Jew, speak about his faults, to reveal wrongs that he committed, though they are true, is worse than murder, is worse than idol worship, is worse than adultery. That's how bad lashon hara or slander is. And the opposite of that is Shmiras Haloshin, to guard one's tongue. Here the Gemara says that Hashem created a person with a tongue that could prove evil, but could also prove good. Tongue is made, speech is made, to be able to speak words of Torah, to be able to beseech, to implore Hashem for assistance, physically, spiritually, daven, and to speak good words, Musa, strengthen within others the faith in Hashem, mitzvahs of Hashem. It's up to a person to have this Shmiras Haloshin, to guard his tongue against speaking evil and to speak only good. If a person feels the urge to speak bad coming on, he just has to close the two gates that Hashem created for the tongue. The Gemara says Hashem created a gate of solid bone and a gate of flesh, hard and soft gates. Bone are the teeth. Clench your teeth. You can still get sounds out. Close your lips. You have these two gates, and no further evil talk can come out of your mouth, through your tongue. Despite this, the Gemara says, despite the two gates that Hashem created against the tongue still gets out and does its harm. The Medrash gives a mashal of a man who once went to sleep and heard his dream, semi-heard, dreamt of it, or it's a mashal, parabola, a man who heard the organs of his body arguing amongst themselves. Each one claimed that it was the most important organ of the entire organism. The eyes said they were the most important because the eyes are the windows of the soul, the eyes are the guide, the eyes select that which is proper, that which is not. Of course, it is the most important one of the five senses, so the eyes claimed that to them belongs the rightful title of king of the body. The ears argued on their behalf, not for the ears hearing things the eyes could not really learn, could not understand, and so forth. The feet claimed they were the most important because a person would be like in a prison if he did not have a means of mobility through the feet. All movement is dependent upon the feet. The hands claimed that they were the most creative, and of course the brain maintained that everything was dependent upon these messages sent through the brain. Finally, the tongue came out and said, all of you are wrong. I am the king, and I demand that you show me the proper respect. Medrash says all the organs laughed at the tongue and said, you are the least important. Go back to your lair, your den, go back to sleep. We refuse to even discuss this with you. The tongue said, well, if you refuse to discuss it, then I'll have to prove my superiority. At that time, the governor was going past, the king or the governor. The tongue called out a very insulting remark. The king heard this. He ordered his soldiers to have this man arrested. The man was thrown into a dungeon, and all the organs turned to the tongue and said, what did you do to us? You're insane. Look what trouble you got us in. The tongue said, well, I wanted to show you that, look what I could do. I can get you into real hot water. Now, you know that in a short time you're going to be taken out. The king is going to have you put to death. So every one of the organs now is going to die. Who accomplished this great feat? Me, the tongue, the king. Now, you bow to me, you'll accept my leadership, my reign over you, because I'm the only one that can save you. I'm the only one that can apologize before the king, that could explain my action, that could ease the situation, and show that the words I said were really complimentary rather than an insult to the king. Of course, the organs were forced to acknowledge this, and they were saved by the tongue's explanation. We won't go into that detail, but about this, the Medrash says, King Solomon Shlomo Melech said this sentence: "Achayim v'hamaves b'yad haloshen." Life and death are within the power of the tongue. A person can live or die through the tongue. Live by speaking the proper words, learning Torah, which is the tree of life, or die by saying things which could cause his death through the sins that come from lashon hara, or nivel peh, profanity, or chilus, or devarim b'telem, which means even if it is not slander, just plain idle talk at a time when he should be davening or learning, this too is fatal. So, the key to purity is the Shmiras HaLashon. Now, there are some people, very, very few, who have perfection in Shmiras HaLashon. There are stories told in past generations about people who were pure. The Chavetz Chaim Zal especially wrote a whole sefer called Shmiras HaLashon. That was more within our time. What is very important for us, those who were zecher to be in Eretz Yisrael this year, the past years, were zecher to see with their eyes one person alive today who really is the epitome, true example of Shmiras HaLashon, guarding the tongue. Is that simple? It is not. Because you take the most awesome day of the year. To us, the first day of Rosh Hashanah, the day in which man was created, the day in which Adam was created, the day in which every person goes on trial, is the holiest, the high holiest day of the year, even more so than Yom Kippur. On this day, Arizal had a custom that, above all, there was Shmiras HaLashon. On this day, Arizal fasted from speech. It's called Tainus Dibur. He did not speak at all during the first day of Rosh Hashanah, other than, of course, the tefillos, prayers said then, or the shiur in Torah which he gave on that day. Aside from that, no speech whatsoever. He did not speak at all. It has become a custom among many of the Arizal students to this day. Many of them have adopted this custom. On the first day of Rosh Hashanah, they refrain from speaking as much as possible, or if possible, completely, aside from davening and learning. But those who have accepted this custom have felt many times very deeply frustrated, because it's very difficult when you're spoken to and you cannot reply, and you just can't wait for the opportunity to have this day end when you can finally express yourself and finally let loose some of this pent-up emotion, especially if somebody said the wrong thing to you. You want to tear into him, and it's only with the tongue you can do that. It's like being, to give it a very fair comparison, it's like being in a foreign country and someone, you try to communicate with someone, they don't understand your language, and you fairly go wild trying to get your point across, and you fail to. That's how it is with one who is unable to speak. Now, I saw this myself, interestingly, before Rosh Hashanah, the week before, I was on a plane with all Rishonim, in English you call it Russians, Rishonim, all Russians, and I had a seat, a good seat there, and then one Russian came to me, he pointed and said, in sign language, it's his seat. And I was surprised because usually the Russians don't mince words. They come out very strongly, they scream in Russian, all that nutty language, they yell at you until they win out. Here this Russian didn't say a word, he just pointed, made sign language. I realized that this poor Russian, we can call him that, was dumb. He couldn't speak. So it was very simple for me, pretending that I was a Russian, but I couldn't understand his sign language. So I retained my seat. And there was a sign, true display of frustration on his part. Now, why I retained the seat, it makes no difference. It wasn't an evil act on my part, chas v'shalom, because for various reasons I was supposed to have the seat anyhow. We won't go into the details of the trip. But the point was that I saw there, I pitied a case like that where a person who cannot express himself is left, is fit to explode, and he is completely helpless. This is the difficulty of Tainas Dibur. You can't speak, and you must get a message across. There's no greater disappointment or no greater nervous reaction than that. Imagine then, true perfection in Shmiras Haloshen. As we said, there is one person in Eretz Yisrael today, one of the official students, Tamidim of Hakim of Rabbi Arizal. His name is Rav Nachman, and he is known as Rav Nachman Shosek. Shosek means the silent Rav Nachman. This silent Rav Nachman has a voice that is as powerful as a lion's roar. If you hear him daven, it's about tefillah as a chazan, the walls tremble. And yet, this Rav Nachman Shosek, the silent Rav Nachman, never speaks. Never speaks. Now, I've known him for approximately 30 years, close to 30 years, a little less than 30 years. At the time that I first met him, he was on this Tainas Dibur, this fasting of speaking, for close to 20 years at that time, which means that it is already nearly 50 years since he has spoken a word. 50 years of Tainas Dibur, one who is not dumb, one who has a strong, melodious voice, one who knows how to express himself, and one who contains himself, who, this is a case of abstention, forced abstention, for the sake of going through life without saying anything wrong. For he knows that he will never be guilty of lashon hara, of any kind of wrong talk. This is a case, a sample of perfection that we have in our time. In other words, it is possible. There are people who have this Tainas Dibur one day a year or so, or a couple of days a year, but ones who are that nishmor, there are other people, of course, tzadikim, who are very careful, though they do speak. They're very careful with what they say. They guard themselves against speaking lashon hara or anything wrong. But of course, no person can be 100% careful unless he really has his Tainas Dibur. So, if we cannot undertake to be like this of Nachman Shosek, and of course, I would say it's practically a hopeless thought, we shouldn't even attempt it. What we should attempt, though, is not to restrict ourselves from speech completely, to limit ourselves, to guard our tongue, and to see that at least we do not emit wrong sounds. A wrong sound is anything bad about another Jew, anything bad about anything that is holy, anything that is valuable in the eyes of Hashem, which means a holy place, a holy person, or a holy item. To speak bad, chas v'shalom, about a sefer, about a mechaber, anything sacred, is the worst type of lashon hara. To speak bad, as the Zayde Kodesh says, that anybody who speaks bad about a Jew, that's lashon hara, that's murder. To speak bad about dirt, karka, earth, is the same lashon hara. To speak against the land of Israel, anyone who visits Eretz Yisrael and comes back with a bad report, that is lashon hara against the Shekhinah. It's the land of Hashem. Eretz is called the Shekhinah. It is speaking against the prized possession of Hashem. The entire globe, Hashem selected this land, small portion, yet it is the most valuable of the entire globe. The rest of the universe pales away. In other words, all the other planets, plus this planet Earth, together, combined, cannot compare to one drop, one iota of Eretz Yisrael, which has 10 levels of holiness. Eretz Yisrael first, then Yerushalmi, then the inner part of Yerushalmi, the Beis HaMikdash, and closer until we get to the Kodesh Kodeshim, the Holy of Holies. All that is Kodesh and Kodesh Kodeshim. So our next step is, if we want to really perfect ourselves, Achdus, unity, and Shmiras Haloshen, to guard ourselves against any kind of evil talk. And this, as we will see, go back to the story, whatever time we have, so we can get the story begun, the story of the division of the 12 tribes, the tearing asunder of the one government under an individual king. There was David HaMelech, who ruled over the 12 tribes of Israel, in whose time there were a lot of problems, a lot of battles, a lot of bloodshed, followed by Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon the Wise, who ruled over the entire land of Israel, a time of complete peace. There were no wars during his time. There was peace among all Jews on earth, and even peace among the middle, the upper level, which means above the human level, the spiritual world, were also at peace with King Solomon, till the final days of his reign, when the problems began. As we know, the problem he had with the king of the Shedim, Ashmedai, who dethroned King Solomon for a period of time, until he finally came back to his kingdom, and he bewailed this in his writings of Koheles. However, the real problem began later on, when Yerovam ben Nevat, Yerovam the son of Nevat, from the tribe of Ephraim, who was very wise, very clever, very learned, a very great tzadik, was appointed by Shlomo HaMelech to rule over the tribes of Menashe and Ephraim, being so wise. And then he was met one day, he was appointed to rule over them, but he did criticize Shlomo HaMelech, which caused a dislike on the part of Shlomo HaMelech later on. He began to dislike Yerovam ben Nevat. He criticized him for closing up, narrowing the gap. If you noticed in the old city, you have the wall around the city, and you have openings, gates. Some are small gates, some are large ones. There's one large gate, a large opening, which enabled Jews in large numbers to pour through into the city for the holidays, to bring their korbanos, the sacrifices. He closed one of these gates for personal reasons, and this Yerovam ben Nevat criticized bitterly, and because of this disrespectful attack, Shlomo HaMelech later on sought to kill Yerovam. First, we note that there was a Navi, a prophet called Achia HaShiloni. Shiloni means from the city of Shiloh, where the Mishkan was originally. Achia HaShiloni was one of the greatest prophets of all time. He was the Rebbe of Eliyahu HaNavi. The Zohar Kodesh says we have no trace of Eliyahu HaNavi's background. That is, as far as his parents are concerned, we don't know anything about his background, his family background, and we're not permitted to even ask about this. We do know that his Rebbe was Achia HaShiloni. This Achia HaShiloni, we'll speak more about him later on, because there's a whole story about Rabbi Nachman Arizal in relation to Achia HaShiloni. Achia HaShiloni met Yerovam ben Nevat in the field one day. He was wearing a new garment, and Achia HaShiloni took off this garment and tore it into 12 parts and said to Yerovam ben Nevat, I give you 10 of these, and I leave one. One, of course, means two. One large one which contains 2 parts to it, meaning that I'm giving you, in the name of Hashem, I give you 10 tribes of Israel. You will become the ruler over 10 tribes of Israel, you become the king, but I promised King David that at all times he'll remain as king, he and his descendants, and therefore there must remain at least one tribe, the tribe of Yehudah, which will also include the smallest tribe, Benjamin. They'll be together, united as one, under the rulership of the family of King David. This will be yours, it could be yours, for generations. Not forever, of course. I tell you now that when Mashiach comes, the kingdom will revert back to the family of King David, because Mashiach, the son of King David, will then rule over all 12 tribes. But because Hashem prefers you now, because Hashem likes your attitude, your ways, Therefore he offers you the 10 tribes of Israel as your new kingdom. Rav Nachman was happy to hear this. Of course, a little later on, King Solomon wanted to kill Yerovam because of what he had said. Yerovam was forced to flee to Egypt and wait there until the passing of Shlomo HaMelech. King Solomon passed away. Then he was able to return, and he was acclaimed by the Jews as king of the 10 tribes, as we'll see in a moment. First, we must point out that King Solomon passed away at the age of 52. Now, this seems like a very young age. We must note that he was 12 years old when he ascended to the throne. He became king at the age of 12. He reigned for a period of 40 years. 40 years is a full term as king. The age of 52, Zohar Kodesh says that the true Malchus, the last of the 10 Sfidas Malchus, is always represented by Malchus Shlomo. Shlomo is also one of Hashem's names. The word Shlomo is Hasholem, Melech Shalom Shalei. The kingdom of Hashem is called Malchus Shlomo. But the true Malchus is of the 4 combinations of Hashem's name. The last one is called Shem Bon, which is 52. This is the reason for King Solomon's passing at that age, which means this was the symbol of Malchus. Now, after his passing, his son, Rechavam ben Shlomo, took over as king. He began to rule the Jews, but he was nowhere near as wise as his father, Shlomo Melech, the wisest of all men. And so, the people approached Rechavam as Yerovam ben came back from Egypt. He acted as their spokesman, and he said to Rechavam, in the name of the Jews, we demand, we don't ask, we demand that you ease up on the taxes, because your father, King Solomon, has taxed us very heavily. We cannot bear these taxes. We demand, we want to have an easing up, lightening of these taxes. This claim, justified or otherwise, was still a claim. Let's remember that in the days of Shlomo HaMelech, there was a prosperity that was unsurpassed and unequaled in all the annals of history. It was a time when people were so wealthy that the metal, silver, was an unused item. No one cared for silver, it was discarded. There was so much gold then, silver was regarded as a useless metal. So if people had their homes filled with this wealth and they were forced to pay taxes, it is understood they still had a lot that remained for them to live in luxury. They should not have complained. But there is always that degree of greed, so they wanted to have that additional wealth by having these taxes cut. They came to Rechavam demanding these taxes to be cut. The question was, what reply should be given to the Jews? Rechavam said to them, give me 3 days time to study this item, this request, and I'll discuss it with my advisors. He came to the elders. There were 2 groups of advisors, the elders and the youth, as in all times. He came to the elders and they said to him, it is more important that you keep peace with the Jews. They'll retain you as king rather than run the risk of having them rebel against you. We advise you, therefore, to cut the taxes in accordance with their request and demand. He came to the youth, and the youth said, you've got to show you're tough. If they said they want taxes cut, show them that you are the leader, you are the king, increase the taxes. Foolishly, the Gemara says, Rechavam followed the advice of the youth, and his reply to the Jews, the spokesman was, Kotoni ovo mi mosne ovi. I'm going to show you that my little finger, my pinky, is wider, thicker than my father's waist, which means that you were given taxes by my father, King Solomon. That was nothing. I'll show you what taxes really means. This was a display of bravado, trying to show courage, trying to show strong, harsh leadership. And of course, this backfired immediately. The Jews got together, and they immediately crowned Yerushalmi ben as their king, the new king, over 10 tribes. Yehuda and Binyamin remained loyal to the family of King David because that part of land contained the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. Now, the first thought on the part of Aharon was to get together an army, mobilize the armies of Yehuda, which was the strongest tribe physically, and Binyamin, to go out and do battle against the other 10 tribes. Mobilize an army of 180,000 soldiers, ready to go out to war. This would have been a perfect example of civil war. Why? Because 10 tribes seceded from the Union. 10 tribes left this one unit, the Jews as a unit, and formed their own government, their own coalition. This was reason enough to go out to war to bring them back into the Union. However, the Navi came to Rechavam HaMelech and told him, don't attempt battle, because if you do, Hashem will not be with you. Know that this is not the act of the Jews. This is because Hashem wants it so. Hashem had threatened previously in the time of King David, the time of Shlomo Melech, there will be a division of the tribes of Israel. It has come to pass now. Accept it, because there's nothing that can be done about it. Till the end of regular time, which means till Mashiach comes, the Jews will not be united again as 12 tribes. So, Rechavam dropped his plans of battle. He accepted this item, sadly, and Yerovam took over as king of the 10 tribes. However, he was afraid that he might lose this kingdom for one reason. When it comes to the holidays, it was the custom of all Jews to go up, Aliyah, they go up to the Beis HaMikdash to bring the sacrifices. If they go up there, they'd be induced by the tribe of Yehuda and Binyamin, the followers of Rechavam, to return to the rule of Rechavam, and Yerushalmi ben would lose his kingdom. And so he set up special idols in the most important cities, the 10 tribes, and proclaimed to the Jews, if you want to offer sacrifices, you worship these idols. He misled them into following these idols, and therefore he was known as a chotei umachti, a sinner of the highest, the worst order. At this point, that Hashem himself turned to Yerovam with a plea for tshuva. Yerovam should do tshuva. And we see how the fact is true that aton nisin yad lapeshim. Hashem does not want a Russia, an evil person, to be destroyed. Hashem wants every Jew, the worst sinner, to come back. Hashem wants the life of a Jew and the goodness of a Jew to come to the surface. Especially before Yom Kippur. You must remember that point. That Hashem wants us back, no matter what we've done. All we need, all that is required of us is true tshuva. Hashem will accept us and take us back. We as individuals and collectively as a people. So if we are zecher together now to do this tshuva shlema, and we are certain that Hashem will take us back, return us to our righteous places, leading people on earth, we're zecher to see the coming of Mashiach, the binyan Beis HaMikdash, and Amen, Amen, Amen.